Good evening, and welcome to Counterculture with Danielle D'Souza Gill. The culture's gone crazy, media's gone mad, and reason has become repugnant. Here we focus on facts and how to fight back. Tonight we'll be discussing the political persecution of conservatives, Christians, and Trump supporters. One very colorful expression from the Chinese goes like this, quote, "Kill the chickens to scare the monkeys." In just a few short words, this expression outlines one of the best methods of controlling large groups of people: fear. By making public examples of those you don't like, you intimidate others who may be sympathetic into thinking twice before showing their support. It's the quickest way to impose your will on the otherwise resistant populace. Fear is the go-to for tyrants and dictators. People like Joe Biden, who constantly rail against his political opponents, casting them as, quote, threats against democracy. We know what this means, but we all know Joe isn't just making speeches. He's sending his message out among our hills and valleys to hunt down those whose voices and ideas threaten him most, and that's these MAGA Republicans. Conservatives call him out for his endorsement of child sexual mutilation. They research his notoriously suspicious election. They investigate his many flagrant violations of the law, his corruption. They oppose his beloved practice of infanticide. They criticize his use of international tragedies to line his own pockets with money, while the streets of faraway nations like Afghanistan and Ukraine are lined with innocent blood. So great is the fear Joe Biden has of MAGA Republicans that he has arrested over 1,000 and plans on arresting over 1,000 more for the January 6th protests alone. But it's not just the January 6thers. It's also anyone he can get on FACE Act charges. People like Mark Houck, whose home was raided by the FBI because they wanted to punish him for protesting abortion. In addition to Houck, a group of 11 people were arrested in Tennessee. In New York, a nonviolent priest was also arrested for the same crime. Keep in mind that these are not isolated incidents of local authorities responding to local disturbances. This is the Federal Department of Justice combing through our streets to find pro-lifers to charge with federal crimes. This is exactly what it looks like when you want to, quote, kill the chickens to scare the monkeys. It's a petty tactic, but the unfortunate truth is that the brutality pays dividends. It works, and it works especially with conservatives. For proof, start perusing the stories of the various January 6thers. You immediately notice how quickly they become destitute. Their girlfriends leave them, their wives divorce them, they don't see their children, they're disowned by some of their own family members and also friends, some of whom go out of their way to publicly humiliate them in interviews with local or national news. They're turned in by people who are their co-workers. A list of people arrested for crimes related to January 6 called American Gulag is maintained by Gateway Pundit. Currently, the site has the names of 950 known defendants, 138 of whom are currently incarcerated either in pre-trial detention or are serving out their sentences. Many of the names on these lists have fundraising links associated with their cases. Go ahead and take a look at the amounts, and you'll notice many, if not most, are nowhere near their fundraising goals. These are families who have lost their jobs, their homes. They can no more pay the $100,000 required for a jury trial than they can afford groceries for their children or their electric bill. One family experiencing a similar personal and financial strain is Robert and Joeylynn Mesaros and the other defendants who drove in a parade of trucks in Texas. We'll speak with Joeylynn more today. The event had absolutely nothing to do with January 6th or the FACE Act, but because the trucks, festooned with American flags and pro-Trump memorabilia, got too close to a Biden-Harris campaign bus in Texas in 2020, and that this was actually shown in the media, this discrepancy between the two buses, they were charged by the DOJ with violating the KKK Act. The purely political prosecution is being supported by media lies based on hysterical eyewitness passenger accounts from people like Democrat Wendy Davis, also known as Abortion Barbie. Just like January 6th, we have unhinged politicians pushing lies through a compliant media in order to facilitate a federal government legal hit job against a large group of people. This is a calculated effort designed to have maximum fear impact. The defendants in this case are being forced to issue public apologies for their political views and defend themselves from completely unfounded charges of bigotry and racism. But some of them are not backing down. And just like January 6th, these lies cost the defendants their friends, family, and jobs. Compare the fate of conservatives to the fate of the defendants who were arrested in the BLM and Antifa riots of 2020. Democrats flocked to their fundraising sites and raised tens of millions of dollars for them, even though they were committing acts of violence and are likely racist themselves. The 2020 rioters got glowing support in the media and benefited from backing by major corporations as well. Even candidate Kamala Harris got in on the action by helping to raise $35 million in funds for just 6 BLM defendants. For the record, that same amount would take care of jury trial costs for more than 350 January 6thers. Why is it so hard for conservatives to raise money when we're the hardworking and productive members of society, you would think? The short answer is that conservatives are scared. They don't want to be associated with controversial instances. They don't want to be associated with someone being slandered as a racist or seditious traitor because they don't want it to happen to them. They're concerned about guilt by association, despite knowing full well that the DOJ is corrupt, biased, and traffics in bald-faced lies. The Democrats have no fear of being associated with someone in Antifa, though. The people who donated to Antifa and BLM defendants didn't hem and haw over the damage or injury the defendants inflicted upon their own police and community and buildings. They donated generously and without reservation. You never heard leftists qualify their support for these defendants the way that Republican politicians do, sometimes distancing themselves from the defendant. Our politicians are more demure and say things like, quote, "There were some bad apples, but," or "We don't know the full story, so I'm waiting to declare my position." Conservatives are masters at giving tepid token support. Probably because many conservatives are used to hiding, used to not voicing their support even in their own daily lives. Meanwhile, not a single Democrat talked like that about BLM or Antifa rioters who burned down whole cities. There's a huge difference between leftists and conservatives. When it comes to conservatives, we engage in the disgraceful practice of leaving our wounded on the field of battle. We leave them to fight for themselves. We need to call out fellow conservatives on this, because, to be honest, if we keep this up, we're not going to win. And it's also shameful cowardice.